Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY sailboat refit video here aboard good old Athena. A while back I made this beautiful laminated beam. In this video I get to use some more of this yellow balau, not to make another laminated beam, but to make some trim for the area here between the saloon and the aft cabin. Also, it is surprising, but this week it is actually warm enough for me to tab stuff to the hull again. Yay for global warming. So let's take full advantage of that. I'm still waiting for the gimbal box that's going to go here in the galley. And until I've got that gimbal box, I can't really get started building the rest of the galley. So it's very fortunate that the temperatures come up a little bit. That means this week I can get a little piece of plywood tabbed to the hull here that's going to separate the head from the sink area. And in the aft cabin, I can clear out this area where the tools are piled up and start building a locker that's going to go here, where we're most likely going to keep coats and shoes. We should be just over 1 minute into this video now. I think it's high time we get to some glorious sanding. So far, so good. Now there is just the small matter of the aft cabin. Bam! The aft cabin is ready for me to start fitting that plywood. And so is the head, but let's not do that right now. Instead, let's go ahead and get the trim all glued up. What I'm thinking is to have something like this beam here, the same dimensions, only of course not curved, and have one of those here and another one over here. I'm not gonna put a door in here. Originally, I was gonna put in a door, but one of you guys left a comment suggesting that I leave it open to have the boat seem, well, more open. And after having molded over a little bit, I really like that idea. Plus, I can always add a door later. The reason I'm adding the trim is of course to make this look nice, but also to help stiffen up this plywood a little bit. As you can see, it is a little bit flexible. Welcome back to the workshop. On my way here, I picked up some goodies. Like I mentioned, this is yellow balau, also known as bankarai. I might very well be mispronouncing both of those because I've ever only seen the name in text. Once this is varnished, it is going to look roughly like this. If you look close, you can see that this is not teak, but that's okay. I still think this looks very good, and it is a lot more affordable than teak. I paid just under $100 for these 5. Had this been teak, then I'd probably have gotten 1 or 2 toothpicks. Because of the much lower cost, I don't mind using a chunk of this to make some nice beefy trim. But the first step is going to be to get this surface nice and smooth. So far, so good. Before I run these through the table saw, I'm just going to give them a light sanding. Here we have all the pieces of the puzzle. The reason I sanded the surface was to key it to get a better adhesive bond when we glue these together. And there's one more important step. Because this is a somewhat oily species of wood, apparently it is a good idea to wipe down the surface prior to gluing them. I don't know if this is the best choice, but I'm going to try my luck with a little bit of white spirits. If nothing else, it looks like I got rid of a lot of dust, which is also important. To glue these, I am of course going to use a little bit of 105 thickened with 406. It's not very warm out here in the workshop, and as you can see, the epoxy is very thick. Fortunately for gluing applications, it's not really that big of a deal. By that, I mean it would have been really annoying to have to wet out fiberglass with this porridge. For gluing, it's fine. I'm sure it would get a better bond if it was a little bit warmer, but it's gonna be okay. Every once in a while, I'll come across a YouTube video with someone using epoxy where it's cold, and they'll go, oh, I'll just add a little bit extra hardener because it's cold. But that's not how epoxy works. That's how polyester works, but not epoxy. With epoxy, you should always stick to the 1 to 5 with West System here, or 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 with some of the other brands. I'm just going to use a tiny dab of epoxy to pre-wet the surfaces. The trick here is to use as little as you possibly can, because if you get a thick layer on there, the two parts are just going to be sliding around. I've got a nice thin coat of epoxy on both sides, and I've mixed up some thickened epoxy. Let's go ahead and get this spread out. Both sides are thoroughly gooped, so let's get the first one on here. And repeat the process for the third one. I need to correct myself because I think I said a little earlier that when using epoxy you should always stick to the standard ratios. And that's actually not true because there are some very specific instances where you use different ratios. But that's for like when building a tank or something like that. So for temperature, you should not mess with the ratios. Had I used regular wood glue for this, then I would have been very concerned about clamping these together really well. But epoxy doesn't need a lot of clamping force, so basically I just need to get them smushed together so there's no little gaps in there. There is the first one, and here is the second one. Look at all that glorious squeeze out. I'll leave these to cure, and then tomorrow we can cut the plywood aboard Athena. I am so sorry for the audio quality in the footage up from the workshop. There was a loose connection in my wireless lavalier mic. What you were hearing was the built-in mic in the Panasonic GH5 camera, which leaves a lot to be desired, but the audio should be fixed now. Tonight I want to make the templates I need for the locker in here and also for the separation in the head. I think we're going to use the locker in here for coats and shoes, so let's make sure we make it deep enough to be able to fit some hangers. And I think those are 43 or 44 centimeters, at least over here. I cut that piece of plywood for the locker in the aft cabin. That was pretty straightforward. Then I moved over here and everything ground to a halt because I think there's some stuff I need to think a little bit about over here. The bent piece of cardboard there, that is going to be the sink area. It is going to extend out all the way to there, and then it needs to transition into that back piece of cardboard somehow, and then the head is going to be there. But to get the most out of this space, I think I'm going to have to do some pretty organic shapes in here. I want the area where the head is going to be, which is here, to be at least 60 centimeters. That's what I've got aboard Obelix, and that's what I consider the bare minimum for being able to get down and get back up again without being too cramped. But I would like for the sink area to be a little bit wider than the space I've got left here. So I'm going to have to somehow, in a not too hideous and also functional way, transition from this area into this guy here. I'm not entirely sure how that's gonna look, so yeah, I want to figure out that before I do anything else. This is a great example of something that seems to work really well on paper and in my head, but then when I'm actually in it, well, then things get a little bit more complicated. I've jotted down the measurements for the head, and it's not gonna come out that far. It is only going to come out to right around here. I think a lot is going to depend on how the head actually fits in there. And even though I've got the measurements for the head, I better hold off on making any kind of final decisions until I've actually got the head in my hands so I can muck everything up in there. Welcome to Cardboard City. This is more or less what I'm picturing. So there's the sink area here. And there are some little drawers up there, and then there's a piece of plywood there because, well, I need to run some stuff behind there, so we need to cover that up. Then there's the head there, shower in here. And this is what the entrance into the head is gonna look like. This is what the head has looked like in, well, my head for at least a while. I do think it's very important to figure out the shape of this corner here so you don't feel super cramped when you're on the head. And yes, of course I know it's nice to be able to wedge yourself in when using the head while underway, but it would also be nice to be able to get in and out of here without having to lube up first. That springs to mind is to push the head a little further into this corner and then angle it a little bit so your legs are coming out more, more like that. But like I said, I won't make any final decisions until I've got the head. So let's leave all of this the way it is. And just like that, it is Sunday morning. You might be thinking, hold up, wait a minute. He didn't get a lot done aboard Athena this week. And you would be correct. But that's because I've been preparing for a super cool upcoming project. Yesterday morning, Mr. Cement Boat Guy and I pulled the engine from their smaller racing sailboat. Martin had built this really cool hydraulically powered setup, but they're trying to sell their smaller boat, and to be able to price it better, he wanted to remove those expensive hydraulic parts and reuse those aboard the cement boat. That leaves them with a surplus of one tiny diesel engine and me lacking one tiny diesel engine. A match made in heaven. After almost an entire day of boat yoga, we managed to pull the little Perkins 402 out of their boat and bring it up to the workshop. The super cute little Perkins 402 is a 2-cylinder diesel engine with roughly 14 horsepower. And while you're probably going, wait a minute, Mess, you've already got an engine here aboard Athena, it's a Volvo D240, that would be true. But what I don't have is a generator, and for that, the little Perkins would be perfect. The plan is to take a couple of 150 amp alternators and strap those to the little Perkins for a theoretical max output of 300 amps, and then build a custom little controller box for which we've already made a little proof of concept that's going to regulate the output. It is going to be a very affordable little DIY generator, and I am super excited about this project. I'll of course bring you guys along on the entire adventure, and I am definitely going to pick up a lot of new skills doing this little project. I think the first step is going to be to get the engine all cleaned and painted since it is out of the boat, and then to build some kind of custom frame. But yeah, we'll get back to that in one of the upcoming videos. Yesterday I also cleaned up the yellow bow. Here's the before and the after. As you can see, they cleaned up really nice. All I did was run them through the table saw and the thickness planer, and yeah, that's the result. Here are the two finished pieces. I think once the corners have been rounded over on these, they're gonna look pretty dang spiffy. One of the reasons I wanted to get those two glued up this week was because I wanted some offcuts that I could experiment with. Because for the head, we definitely want a door, and that door I would like to have a bent lamination door frame, something like that. I think that would look really cool. This is 4 millimeters thick, and as you can see, it takes the curve pretty well, so I think this is what I'm going to be making the door frame out of. Before ending this video, I still want to take advantage of the nice warm weather and put up the first little piece of the locker in here in the aft cabin. I'm going to have to trim this bit of plywood down here. It was too dark to do that when I made the template. The new piece of plywood is pretty much spot on where I want it. I'm gonna adhere it to the old piece of plywood, and then once all of that has cured, then I can trim that little bit of excess old plywood. But before I can do that, I do need to prep the surface. Unfortunately, I am out of nut trowels, so yeah, this is not gonna be pretty. But I'm sure it'll be okay. This is not really a structural application. In the spirit of going the extra mile, and also because I still need to tab a tiny bit of the cabin sole to the hull, I'd totally forgotten about that, we might as well go ahead and tab the plywood to the hull too. That's the last bit of cabin sole to add to the hull and also the inside of the closet. There is one last little thing I want to mention before ending this video, and that is in regards to my Icelandic sheepdog Jökull. A lot of you guys have been asking. He is fine. He's had no less than 3 eye surgeries over the last couple of months. It's been a big deal, but he is much better now, and according to the vet, there is a very slim chance that he's ever going to have problems with his eyes again. So everything is good. I'm fast running out of time for today, and I better get busy editing this video right now. As far as next week, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be working on. I would love to start putting up some of the outer veneer plywood on the bulkheads that are done. That would allow me to put up the laminated beam and also the 2 trim pieces from this video. But to do that, I would need to get my hands on some 4mm plywood, which I don't know how easy that's going to be. So we'll see what happens. But as always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!